misconceptions might be occurring amongst your practicing peers or other physicians in general. What do you hear that people say about being in that innovation space or being in the industry?
Yeah, I think we want to be very transparent, right, with our audience here. The innovation needs to be a partnership between the company and the patients. Understanding the unmet need that you are trying to address with your innovation is critical. I think they use people like me and my team, right, to be translators, to understand what kind of solution can we bring to the table and collectively create something that can meet those two goals, right? Do the right thing for the patients while you are actually meeting your commercial target.
911, what's your emergency?
Hello and welcome to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. I'm your host, Lee Scheinbart, and this podcast brings you the hottest and most crucial conversations in healthcare and physician leadership. Our guest today is a global leader in healthcare and is speaking to us from the Netherlands, although she is originally from Brazil. Today's guest is Dr. Carla Goulart Peron, the Chief Medical Officer of Philips, and she leads a global team of medical and scientific experts working within and across Philips businesses. Carla and her team design and implement the company's medical strategy and provide medical oversight and thought leadership across the company. Their collective role is to help drive meaningful innovation through excellence in medical safety, medical affairs, health economics, and clinical research. A former OBGYN physician and now with more than 15 years of experience in medical device and pharmaceutical industry leadership positions, Carla combines her strong clinical background with her executive experience and a hands-on approach to lead highly engaged teams with a reputation for complex problem solving, critical thinking, and collaboration. And if you know Carla, then you know that everywhere she goes, she brings a particular passion about innovation to her work in order to improve access to care. Carla, welcome to the Fire Chief Podcast. So honored to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lee. It's an honor to be here participating of this conversation.
Lovely. Wonderful. So listen, let's start at the beginning for our listeners. Once upon a time, like so many of us, you were practicing medicine and then something changed. What sparked that initial thought that you could have a broader impact outside of direct patient care? And how did you know that the timing was right?
That's a great question. And I think we get that a lot when we go into the other side of what is expected for a traditional physician, right? Because I think we go into med school with that dream or passion about impacting patients on a one-on-one basis. And I think the answer for your question is curiosity. I didn't plan for it. At the place that I was doing my residency on OBGYN, at that time, they were running the HPV vaccine trial in Brazil. And that site, by a coincidence, was one of the largest enrollment sites for that clinical trial. And that's why I learned, that's interesting. That's how companies that are developing technology, products, drugs, devices, which I didn't know much about at that time, are actually engaging with the healthcare professionals. So I started learning a little bit more about that project. I ended up being a clinical trial coordinator for the project, start consulting, and then I realized, okay, if this vaccine ends being a success, this will reach so many women in so many different places that my impact will be much bigger than what I can handle on a daily basis, right? Seeing patients on a one-on-one. So that's what I start thinking about it. But as you said, making a decision of leaving that very comfortable place that you are seeing your patients, you are the one in power of making decisions. You know what to do. You know how to measure the impact. To kind of transition, it was a journey, right? It took me about 10 years doing both, consulting to the pharmaceutical industry in Brazil while I was building my private practice, until I got to a point that I realized, okay, I'm probably not doing any of those things as good as I would like to. Plus, I got married. I had 2 kids. So I was also trying to manage all those things. So I ended kind of say, I just need to give it a chance. And I transitioned with that mindset, I'm going to still keep my clinical practice every 2 weeks to keep my skills, to be in the OR doing surgery, which I was very passionate about. And if things doesn't work well, I will be able to go back. And then I quickly realized I'm not going back. I can do a very good job here. I can influence others. And that's how I made the decision and transition officially and never went back.
There are several compelling parts of that story that I want to comment on. The first is the HPV vaccine that you're referring to. As a practicing oncologist, that was a game changer for us to believe that something could be done to alter the prevalence and incidence of cervical cancer and ultimately oral cancer as well. And I think that to hear your story about the light bulb that went off in your mind, how large of an impact something so simply elegant as a vaccine to a virus could shape the lives of so many people. So I certainly understand that impact. I also want to pick up on your notion of it wasn't so much timing. It was that moral compass that you felt saying, look, I could do a pretty good job half of the time over here and a pretty good job half of the time over here, but I could do a really good job if I put all my energy into one role. And that's what I heard. And it was less about timing. We all have busy lives and we all get to a place where there's a lot of things we're juggling. But it feels like and I've heard this from other chief medical officers, I just can't do half a job half as well. I have to do one job really well. And I'm wondering, does that make sense as I share that with you?
It does, absolutely. It resonates a lot, right? And I think that same approach was used for me to make peace with myself and leave completely the clinical practice, because I got to a point that I was thinking, what am I doing being in the OR, once a month or twice a month? My skills are not the same. I'm not doing any favor to those patients, right? I don't feel as confident, so I need to bring someone to help me on those procedures. I am better using my time and impacting more and doing better if I use my medical knowledge in the industry. And I think that's really how I shift my mindset. And I have no regrets. I miss deeply the OR time and that environment. But I truly believe that that's the right place to be, right, where I can make a bigger impact.
Yeah, and we talked about that before, and I share that with you that I too miss clinical practice, but the moral clarity of saying, if I'm not doing it all day, every day in the OR, I'm not going to be as good as the next person who you should be seeing and who should be taking care of you. So we're of the similar mind when it comes to these types of decisions. So let's talk about impact now. So now you are in a place where that impact is very different than being in the OR or in the examination room. So what does impact look like to you now? And how do you compare that to that one-on-one impact that they used to have?
Yeah, that's another great question, because I think impact can have different meanings, right? So when I was on the process of joining Philips, one of the things that I was looking at was the mission, right? So impact with care, better care for more people. That's really part of the Philips statement. And it's not only statement, right? The company is really committed to serve more patients in underserved communities and in different areas and offer better care for more people. And this is what this role is about. It's less about you impacting directly a patient, but it's you enabling, right? Enabling other physicians that are part of my team at this point to support safe and effective products in the new product development cycle, to make sure that we not only think about the innovation in isolation, but also the healthcare environment and how we're going to be able to offer something that is cost effective. It's another thing that is very deep and close to my heart, because I think products are only effective if we can actually use them on the patients that deserves. And I think HPV vaccine is really a great example going back. That first spark on that clinical trial happened more than 20 years ago, right? And we still have places where the vaccine is not fully available, or areas on countries and in places where it's not fully available. And cervical cancers are still killing people that could be prevented with the vaccine. So this is what impact means for me. It's no longer that ability of seeing that one patient being very successful in the journey of being healthy, but it's enabling other clinicians, engineers, drug developers to get products out there and ensuring that they can be available on the patients, independent where they are.
Yes, absolutely. So listen, as we're reflecting on our past careers, both of us, you and I, right? It's very personal why we choose to become a physician, why we stay at the clinical bedside. And of course, we're talking about making these career changes. And those career changes are very, very, very personal. So as you have lived in this new space, if you will, and you realize the impact that you have, are there any particular moments or stories that you could share with our listeners about something that occurred on your watch, basically, where you said, this is why I did this. This is my new form of impact. Are there any stories that come to mind?
Yeah, there are a few, right? So, but I'll start back there when I was early stage of my career, still serving a Brazilian company, which was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in Brazil. And they had a very, let's say, old legacy portfolio with products that were not very well established. But they had drugs that were very, very good, but were very limited clinical data to support safety and performance. And one of the drugs that was probably responsible for 10% approximately of the revenue of the company was under a huge threat because of the new regulatory thresholds. And it was really hard to convince the business internally to invest in running the clinical trial to keep the drug in the market. And during that discussion, the CEO at that time told me, okay, if you fail the clinical trial, would you give me back your bonus? I said, yes. If I win the clinical trial, if it becomes a success, would you give me back 1% of the total revenue of that product? And he was, oh, you truly believe that you can do it? And I said, yes. If the drug is as good as we think it is, we will design a clinical trial and execute on time to keep the product in the market. And I truly believe on this. And he was, okay, done. Um, and we ended being able to run that study and keep the drug in the market. And that was the first time that I said, oh, that aha moment. Those are tough conversations, right? Because it's about revenue, it's about business. And those are not things that we learn that much in med school. And I was able to kind of convince that group that it was worthy the investment because the drug was good and we would be able to actually execute that. So it was very rewarding for me to see the drug in the market. I left the company before they finished the trial, but even though I was able to kind of feel that, I think, good feeling of we did it, right? It was the right thing to do for the patients we were kind of tackling.
And that's a theme that we're hearing in just the first few minutes of this podcast of that moral clarity. We know what the right thing is. We are trained as clinicians and clinician scientists. And look, the pharmaceutical industry is full of scientists, but sometimes we come to different conclusions about the data or the reality or the goals of the business. And sometimes it takes someone to look, a leader stands up and puts it on the line and says, yeah, I'll forgive or forego or give up in order to do the right thing because it's the right thing. The same reason you might add on a case late in the day because it's the right thing to do, even though you're tired. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciate you sharing this with our listeners that just because you move from the bedside doesn't mean you give up the same attributes and character traits that create the competent clinician. You are a competent leader as well. And there's very little difference between bedside and boardroom when it comes to doing the right thing. So let's talk a little bit about how did you navigate all of this change with your colleagues and your family? And I'll give you, for instance, I was told once when I transitioned away from the bedside, well, how are you going to explain to your grandmother what you actually do? Because she understands when you say you're a doctor, but she doesn't understand what you're doing inside the boardroom. So how did you navigate that? And especially for people in your close circle who didn't understand the role of a corporate healthcare CMO.
So that's funny. My youngest daughter, she was 4 by the time I made the transition, and she asked many times, "What do you do?" So they are attending school classes, and they need to explain what their parents do. She was kind of like, it was so much easier when I would say you were delivering babies at the hospital. I think it was translating that medical support into developing new technology. That was the easiest way to explain. So I'm still serving as a clinician, and I always say I'm still a physician. Sometimes people say we're no longer or former OBGYN. We are always going to be representatives of our specialty. I'm not as up to date. I can do surgery at this point, but that magical knowledge, that empathy for the patients, that understanding of how the diagnostic, the prevention, the treatment actually works, makes that difference in developing new technology or new drugs that will help diagnose, prevent, or treat diseases. So that's how I usually explained um, to my daughters by the time I joined. And to your point, my grandmother passed at the age of 102. And I needed to explain that to her many times because she tended to forget every time we would see each other. Remind me what you do for a living? And I think that's the easiest way, right? It's how we shape innovation, whatever is in the drug development space or in the device or in the combination. And I think we're going to be applying that same thing for AI, which is software, something that I don't think we even thought about it, right? To make sure products are safe, effective out there and supporting patients in their journey.
Yeah, we'll talk about AI in just a few moments, but what a beautiful story about your daughter and, of course, your grandmother. And I'll share something. So my grandmother passed before I had to explain to her what a chief medical officer does. And yet what she said when I was going through medical school, she said to me, listen, if anybody ever asks you where you got your degree, you pause and you correct them and tell them that you earned your degree. No one just simply gave it to you and you didn't simply get it. And remember that once you've earned it, it's yours forever. So like you, and I have been in the same room where people tend to look at you as though you're not a physician anymore. No, you've earned it and you get to keep it. And I'm glad your daughter is growing up with someone like you who can set the record straight. So
I love that. I'll keep that to myself. We earn it, right? And
we
that's
do
an
earn it.
important
And it's important to recognize that. So let's switch a little bit again in the same idea that our family may not understand what we do. And some people don't look at us like we're physicians anymore. What misconceptions might be occurring amongst your practicing peers or other physicians in general? What do you hear that people say about being in that innovation space or being in the industry, the leadership role, that are just simply wrong? That if you want to set the record straight, what misconceptions come to you?
Yeah, I think if we want to be very transparent, right, with our audience here, I think the first thing that I hear most often is that you went to the wrong side of the force, right? Companies only care about revenue and growth, margins, stock price. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that I've seen so far, right? I have 20 years of experience. And yes, companies are profitable entities like hospitals, right? Like our private practices. And this doesn't exclude the fact that they also care about the patients that they are serving. And then safety, performance of the portfolio and the products is as important as kind of making profitable margins out of it. So for me, that's the first one. And I think requires a lot to join those organizations and understand deeply how things works. And one thing is not excluded than the other. The other thing that for me, it's really interesting, right? Then I only realized when I got into the innovation is that companies knows everything, right? Upside down. The innovation needs to be a partnership between the company and the patients that are represented by the physicians and the providers, right? So the healthcare system is complex. Understanding the unmet need that you are trying to address with your innovation is critical. How the healthcare happens around you, right? What suits the Brazil healthcare system, which is a universal healthcare, may not be the same or ideal for the US or for the Netherlands or for China, right? And that's another very big, I think, misconcept that companies know everything and they are operating in isolation. They are not. I think they use people like me and my team, right, to be translators and to interact with the physicians, the providers, the healthcare, the government, to understand what kind of solution can we bring to the table and collectively create something that can meet those two goals, right? Do the right thing for the patients while you are actually meeting your commercial targets.
Yeah, you made me think about something for the first time, and I'll thank you in advance for that. They talk about math and physics and science as being universal languages, right? So 2+2 is the same in this country as it is in the Netherlands, as it is in Brazil. And when we talk about medical science and medical care, aside from the structure, like a universal system or a national healthcare system, the science, the practice, the delivery is essentially the same. Here's the diagnosis, here's the intervention, here's the outcome. Those tend not to change. Now, there are regional differences about, say, malaria exposure or other geographically confined diseases. But generally speaking, the language of doctoring for you should be the same pretty much everywhere you go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're going to have probably a wide variety of emerging physician leaders from across the world listening, because we know we've expanded our audience, and they've been training for years to become competent clinicians. And some of them are very hungry to learn about leadership. What skills from the bedside translate much easier for you into the corporate leadership? Which ones required reinvention, or what new ones have you had to learn? So tell us about some of these leadership skills that you have.
Yeah, a little bit about my journey, maybe just to help the folks that are listening to us today, right? So I think empathy is something that we learn as we earn our degree, right? Being in the patient's shoes, understanding how things work and what is the best for that specific case. It's something that we ended learning naturally, and I think that helps a lot. The other thing that we don't have an option, it's decision-making process, right? Most of the time, it's you and the patient, and you own that seat of making the decision and explaining why this is the best decision. We also work under a huge pressure, right? And we know that. I remember when I was thinking about transitioning, I was saying, okay, here I work sometimes 24/7, right? Or 24 hours or 12 hours break. Oh, well, at least at the industry, I'll have the weekends, right? And I can plan accordingly, which sometimes it's true, sometimes not. But I think managing time, managing pressure, making decision quickly, those things are things that transition very quickly. Where I believe that we need to be honest with ourselves in order to be attractive. Most of the positions that are posted at where companies are hiring physicians, they are posted at the senior manager, director level. So you enter that environment without the opportunity to learn from the beginning, right? You have never been an intern in a company. No one actually told you how to use simple tools like Outlook or do performance management, lead other people, right? We are used to delegate or do ourselves. We don't really learn naturally how to develop others, right? Offer feedback. A lot of things that are more straightforward. The second thing that for me requires a lot of reinvention or even development. We're not great in developing stakeholder management and influencing because, as I mentioned, or you make the decision or you delegate the decision, and because it's not your place to be. When you enter the industry, you are no longer the one in charge, right? It's no longer your decision. You sometimes will have the power of the veto, of course, if it's something unique as safety, because you are the safety expert in that room. But most of the moments, you are offering your perspective and you need to convince others that this makes sense. You need to help to understand their language, right? You need to help to translate that into a business case, which we are not necessarily very well equipped. And then, of course, there are technical skills that I believe are very helpful. As you go into innovation in the industry, you need to understand the regulatory environment, what is required for you to clear a product in US market, in the European market, in the China market, which is different, how to deal with investors, right? I'm in a public trading company, how you manage the conversation with government affairs or Minister of Health, not necessarily on a technical level. So I think those are leadership skills that we ended developing if we go into those types of position. And sometimes it's hard because we don't have the ability to observe that from the get-go, right? It's almost like expected that you as a senior leader, as usually how you are hired in those companies, come with that already built into who you are.
Yeah. And look, it's a lot easier to learn and earn your medical degree and then go into industry than it is for a senior director or senior vice president of industry to suddenly become a physician. That's unlikely.
Yeah.
But I think you stated it very nicely as having this self-recognition of we don't know what we don't know. And we are used to writing an order in the chart and it gets done. And we will hold the rest of the team accountable if they didn't get it right or things didn't go well, or ourselves if we made the decision that was not the best. But in the corporate structure, as you describe, and what I've experienced is, well, let's start with what's the color of the chart? Where's the chart located? Who reads the chart? Do we all agree this is the order we're putting in the chart? And can we all live with the results of that order? It's just a very different behavioral process. And it does take time and learning and training, but physicians can do it. Now, it doesn't mean every physician should go into these roles, but they can. Do you agree with that thought?
I do agree. I think you also need to understand what motivates you when you are thinking about leaving your clinical practice, right? I think that's critical.
And that is my next question. So if folks are listening right now and they're feeling this pull towards the industry, similar to your original experience with the HPV, what questions should they ask themselves, in your opinion, to ensure that they're running towards something meaningful and not just running away from something else or running away from the strain of work or burnout feelings? What do you think about this?
I think that is the question, Lee, right? That you need to ask yourself. You were forever considering that. Am I running from this job because I'm too stressed? I don't like seeing patients, or I'm not happy with how I'm managing the insurance, any of those reasons. Those are not the right reasons. They can be there, right, when you make your decision, because sometimes it exists. But you really need to be looking for something else, right? You really need to be looking to be curious about a different way of impacting the patients that you are considering serving. You need to be curious about innovation, pushing for change. Requires a lot of patience and resilience and ability to be out of your comfort zone to be successful in that transition. So if you are not very much aligned with the why you want to do that, I think there is a high chance that this transition will fail and you will go back to what you knew how to do before or your comfort zone. So uh, it needs to be something that is really inspiring you to make that big change, that you feel comfortable to be curious and out of your comfort zone. It is different, right? And we need to acknowledge that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I love this because it reminds me of how so many of us at some point have this light bulb moment, whether we're 10 years old or 20 years old. I will seek to go to medical school and become a physician. And it's hard to explain to people, but people appreciate it. And they're like, oh, good luck to you. But you're drawn to it. You feel like a magnet pull and you sort of lose sense of time and space because you're in this place that you want to be in. That pull is important when you switch careers and move into physician or healthcare leadership, because if you are running away from something or just experimenting, you will probably reach a moment where it's no longer an experiment, or you're still running from something and you really haven't replaced that sense of awe or inspiration, as you alluded to, about why you're doing what you're doing. And then you won't feel the impact the same way. And so the energy that you get from doing the work may be missing if you're not tuned in. So I really love what you said about that. Well, let's talk about the hottest topic on just about every healthcare podcast there is, which is AI. And you brought it up earlier, and I do want to hear your thoughts on this. So as you look ahead and you work with your teams, how do you see medical technology and AI transforming patient care over the next decade, whether it's within your company or more broadly, and how that will shape the future?
I'll tackle that in two pieces, right? The first one is really about the companies and how do I believe AI will be incorporated in product, in two aspects of it. The first one is how we develop technology or drug, right? Drug development, device development, software development, because a lot of what we do today is software as a medical device. And I think AI is going to transform how we do that. We're already seeing it, right?
Mhm.
So ability to kind of potentially design a virtual clinical trial that shows failure mode, or which one of those drugs or those devices has better success. Stratifying patient population, understanding really the unmet need in a deeper way, because today I think we're in a narrow space of precision medicine and what that means, how you actually process the amount of data required for you to create something that is really precise for that patient. So I think AI will be used internally to develop technology and will definitely be part of the products in the future, right? Especially in the medical devices space. Today, close to 50, 60% of all the devices approved by the FDA have some level of AI or automation incorporated to it. In my view, today more in the automation space, by removing some tasks that are not as critical and kind of making the workflow for the users better. But we are starting to see slowly AI moving into helping clinical decision making, eventually giving some guidance for physicians, or even taking over some specific tasks or activities, right? We have already AI out there that is actually reading normal X-ray better than residents, right? And we are seeing AI really reducing time for procedure execution, getting reports automated, you name it. So I think that's going to be a reality, right? How and how fast? I personally believe that we are going to kind of be part of that journey, right? I hear all kinds of things. I'm sure you see the same. Oh, AI is going to come and reduce 50% of, the workforce. I think that's just us trying to predict the future, and we don't know that yet. But that this is be part of the revolution, absolutely. The other piece that for me it's very personal to my heart, and one of the reasons I think I'm always kind of convinced that I need to keep going and partnering with the industry, with nonprofit. It's how we can use AI to improve access to healthcare, right? As an OBGYN physician, Brazilian, 10 years in the US, 2 years in the Netherlands, I definitely have a global footprint around my career. It's unbelievable the amount of disparity that we still see out there, right? We touch base quickly on the cervical cancer. Depending of where you were born, will define if you may suffer from that disease, right? Or you get prevention from vaccine, how early this could be detected, what kind of treatment you have, and ultimately what kind of the outcome you will be potentially impacted for. So I believe technology and AI will help us to kind of build a bridge and remove that disparity. Hopefully, maybe I'm a dreamer, but I think starting from the difference between female and male, I'm a very passionate about women's health and how big is the gap and access to care for female. And we sometimes think about this in low income countries like Brazil or Africa, but it's happening under our nose in the US and Europe as we speak, right? And I think by using technology like AI, algorithms, wearables, digital solutions, integrating those platforms, creating interoperability, we will enable to put the patients in a place where they are no longer being that inert voice. They will be able to kind of look for their own ability to get prevention, treatment, that early diagnostic. So I do truly believe that AI will revolutionize the way we are doing healthcare. And I think it's much needed because the way we are operating today is, we all know it's not sustainable. And the world is struggling, generally speaking, on offering health for people.
There's 8-9 billion people on the planet. Let me be the one out of that 9 billion to say, yes, you should have dreams. I love your dreams. Leaders need dreams to carry out the vision of what they're talking about. And I haven't thought much about AI and access. And it's certainly in this country, there's a big discussion about access. It's happening from the highest levels of governments all the way down to every small community in Montana and Wyoming, where access is critically important. And, there are some folks who will state that, listen, not everybody has an iPhone or can use a wearable or can access technology. And that is true. But by and large, and I'll bet you'll support this, in developing countries, people have access to a mobile device. And it's now so widespread that it's just a matter of helping them use that tool for daily commerce or transportation the same way they would use it to access care. And access is also an affordability issue, because if they don't get that proper upfront, like an HPV vaccine, they may suffer the consequences years later. So if we can provide early intervention through access, we're going to really help people downstream. We may not see it in our lifetime, but we'll see it generationally. So I love your dream, and this conversation has been nothing but fantastic, opening up my mind. Any last thoughts or words for our listeners, many of whom think about physician leadership? They want to get into different spaces. So I'll give you the last commentary, please.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to, I am a dreamer and I love what I do. And I do believe that we need to love what we do and do what we love, because that's what we offer the best to people around us. So my maybe message will be curious, right? Be courageous, think out of the box. And for me, what worked very well was being intentional. When I decided to join the industry, I started voicing it. I got a job, then I moved from one company to another. And I got to a point that I was kind of, okay, I really want to be closer to innovation. So I need to get out of Brazil, unfortunately, because innovation, still most of it is in the US and in Europe. So I was very intentional that, hey, I want an opportunity to be closer to the R&D organization. And move my family to the US, and had an amazing opportunity to kind of be part of meaningful innovation. Now I'm in the Netherlands, continuing that journey. So for me, it is about doing what you love, making sure that you keep that curiosity, and you really, really keep that voice of the patient. Because I loved what you said, right? We earn that medical degree and we have an oath, right? We are always going to be representing what is better for the patients. And I think that is unique to us as physicians, and we can make a big difference in how we shape healthcare in the future if we go into that journey.
Do what you love and love what you do. That is a great way to wrap this show up. Thank you so much for being with us today, Carla. It has been fantastic. You have been listening to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. Do you want to learn more about what it is like to be a CMO, how to become a CMO that can have a worldwide impact? Connect with me, but more importantly, connect with Dr. Carla Goulart Peron. Check her out on LinkedIn, check out our website, check out the Philips website. And as most of you know by now, I love talking with CMOs from all over the world. So get out there, get worldwide, and be a chief. But whatever you do, in the words of Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, remember, let's be careful out there.